Hello and welcome to Simply inTAXicating. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, popularly known as IBC, it's a new piece of legislation on the horizon of corporate laws. But it has just completed 2 years, and Union Corporate Affairs Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, is apparently very happy with the results so far. And if we look at certain rough estimates being talked about, reported about, that IBC has been able to ensure some kind of recovery to the tune of 1 lakh crore. I am not very sure about this figure, but it has been talked about. If we look at number of applications being filed, the IBC applications for recovery of loans, etc., Mr. Jaitley said that apparently IBC has triggered some sort of tectonic shift in the lender-borrower environment in the economy, and which is doing wonders for the investors. We have 4 domain experts. They will look at various aspects of IBC, to what extent IBC has been able to set its benchmark, whether it will be able to sustain the momentum of recovery of bad loans. We will look at technical aspects, we will look at some of those administrative side, we will also look at purely the legal side and how exactly a corporate entity should adopt different kind of strategies to defend itself from this kind of IBC applications. So we have Mr. Krishnamohan K Menon, the advocate and record in Supreme Court, our knowledge partner, Mimansa Law, and Mohit, also advocate from Mimansa Law, our knowledge partner, Mr Saurabh Gupta, indirect tax head, Vedanta Group, and then of course we have Mr. Sanjeev Ahuja he's the co-chair of the IBC committee with the PhD chambers and professionals as well. So let me start with Mr. Menon. Please tell us a little bit about this 2 years it has completed. It's a landmark, I mean, it came just before the GST, and these 2 legislations are being largely billed as something which has done wonder for India's, improving India's ranking in ease of doing business ranking. And as a professional, as an advocate, how do you look at this IBC performance so far?
I think, of course, there is always a good and bad to everything. But by and large, I would stay on the positive side. And there's a reason is that I think it cures a few habits we have as Indians. We tend to take things a little lightly, particularly the laws. Maybe that's a habit that we've evolved over a particular period of time, that we can see it in the court. But with the coming into force of GST and IBC, I wouldn't separate them, because both of them actually show a common converging point, that the flexibility of the law doesn't exist anymore. Earlier, as lawyers, we used to say that violations are procedural, they're not substantive, and the courts had a lot of discretion to allow or disallow something. The discretion has completely gone down. And the winding up laws earlier, even if I had an admitted debt and the other party has proceeded against me in a winding up, the court could still look into the issue of whether it was just and reasonable to wind up the company. Maybe that is right in a certain sense for a more mature economy, if I may say.
Right.
But the Indian economy maybe leads a little more of a stick. And IBC is that stick, where that discretion has been taken away from the court. If there is a debt, you either fall in the operational creditor category, that is a vendor who has provided goods and services and not gotten money, or a financial creditor, being somebody who has advanced money and he has not been paid back. If they file an application and you are not able to show something from the documents to show your bona fide, then you're done. And the court doesn't have too much of a discretion to make too many changes. And that is one stark difference, and that triggers fear. And fear is one strong emotion on which even individuals, not only individuals, families, even corporates operate.
Right.
That fear is essential for us to keep money in circulation in the economy. Otherwise, what is happening is, at one end, we would keep money with us, we wouldn't pay what is coming, and the same system is following completely. And economy cannot function without circulation of money, because money stagnant has no value.
Right.
So I would definitely take it as a positive move. Of course, it has its drawbacks as to evidence mechanism being completely
we will touch those drawbacks also separately. Yes, but it's a very Mr. Sanjeev, in fact, I would like you to have your comment. Very important point. He said that apparently the IBC as a stick, it has come, and the discretion of the court is gone. Is it good or bad for the economy?
Okay, a small tweak, I guess. Discretion of law is gone, but discretion of court remains.
Okay.
That is what we are saying.
Okay.
Because essentially what happened is
the court has certain inherent powers, so they can
court
always
has
exercise.
inherent powers. We've even seen, like, Supreme Court had to use Article 142, right, in a couple of cases, and rightly so, because whenever there's a new piece of legislation, it requires a proper interpretation and application. So what happens, like, it goes from the very basic, the first level, which are adjudicating authority, NCLT.
Right.
Then you go into appeal at NCLT, and eventually it has to go to Supreme Court to kind of, look at a settlement of law in terms of application where there is a confusion. Now, if I were to speak on, like, in last 2 years, how things have changed. So it's an evolving law, right? I mean, it's a new piece of legislation. But one clear distinction I really want to kind of always make between GST and IBC is both were taken to be the game changers. Let me tell you, IBC has changed the game.
It has changed the game, yes.
Right? GST might be a work in progress where, like, we're inching towards subsuming 17, acts into one.
It's also changing.
IBC has, absolutely, it's changing, absolutely.
Yes.
But IBC changed the game.
Right.
Right? We've seen cases like, amongst the top 12 cases, like, 4 of them have seen the light of the day. The delay is, like, a different set of, our discussion, what we can.
Right.
But we moved from debtors in possession to creditors in control. Right, so from US thing, like, the typical bankruptcy, we have moved to UK law, where we have kind of, copied a lot of, the UK legislation with adequate tweaks for the Indian context.
Right.
Small challenges in terms of, regular changes in last 2 years, what we've seen. Actually, if I were to talk about positive on that front, is that the legislator has been proactive. So when they figured out that, there were certain anomalies left or some inconsistencies, so they've been proactive to really go back on the drawing board, take the feedback from the ground, like, make the changes, and then come back with amendments. Now, how, like, are we plugging one loophole and creating 2 more is again a question of debate. And as a resolution professional on the ground, I can, like, vouch that there is some positive movement with certain challenges thrown in. But I think, like, all in all, as we heard, it's something good happening. And it's a direct hit on the culture and the mindset of the people, how we used to, like, do business prior.
So let's hear it from the player in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely.
That the corporate India, it's very important. How exactly the corporates
how do
are
they
looking
feel
at it? How they feel it. Yes.
See, if you look at, we are not on the another side where you got acquired or something.
Okay.
But if you take a data
Right.
from 2010 to 2018, so earlier the NPA was roughly $10 million or so. Currently it is $170 million. So 17 time increase in last 8 years or so, you can say. So that is very alarming. Okay. Something had to be done because the earlier act, whatever you call it, SICA Act or SURF-SI or many other companies act, those amendments, those are having a fragmented approach. Okay, so it's not working. It's not working either side because it took too much time. Court intervention is too much, personal intervention and all those kind of things are not allowing businesses to move further, either side. So I agree with Krishna and Sanjeev that yes, it is a good law. Okay. It will give certain kind of certainty, but if you are in business, then you need to deal with the uncertainties. You need to find out how it could work out for you.
Absolutely, yes. So let me go to Mohit. You have just heard,
Yes.
So what is your observation? So far you have heard 3 speakers.
See, the main idea of implementing IBC was ease of doing business. Now, if we go by the figures, there is a drastic increase in the ranking of India, if you see. It has come from 142 to 77. But if we go in detail, the factors, the corporates, they are facing difficulty in defending their cases. The corporate is not very happy because the kind of control which has been given to the creditors, it's enormous. Now, ease of doing business is something in which these corporates, they were working, the credit schedule was bigger in earlier days. Now that has become very strict and stringent.
Right.
And even a small amount of rupees 1 lakh, that can cost them, the company,
Right, right.
And the worst part is that once the IRP is appointed, they lose control of the company. So something which you have built over years, that goes away for a mere infraction of 1 lakh rupees. So I agree with Krishna on the point that yes, it is a positive side to it, but there is a negative side to it also.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the threshold is an area of concern.
Absolutely.
I mean, that threshold, what should be the, what could be the ideal threshold, for this kind of scenario? Of course, it's so difficult, because if we look at the NPAs, for instance, the list which has been sent by RBI to, to the 12, and where 25% of the total NPAs accounted by these people,
right.
Lakhs of crore.
Sure.
So, but, what could be the ideal threshold? Yeah.
I suppose
if you look at from business side, so now yes, as far as filing of claim is concerned, there is no differentiation between your financial creditor and operational creditors.
Right.
And somehow I feel that operational creditors to be kept at back, okay, because this law is primarily to resolve the problem of the financial creditors.
Okay.
So this limit of 1 lakh rupees, I personally feel is very low. It should be at a substantial amount where most of the operational creditors are kept away. Okay. So maybe your 1 or 2, if good suppliers are there, their amounts are running in crores, they may be given an opportunity, but not each and everyone, because now each and everyone can come if
So,
amount is more
do you
than
agree
1
with
lakh
this
rupees.
idea that the operational creditors should be excluded, or maybe
Not excluded.
threshold should be so high that a good number of them they get excluded on their own?
I think something around 50 crore, I don't know which number.
So my take is
That
you
should be
put
there.
a number and you'll always have somebody kind of coming back and
Coming
challenging
back
that,
and
right?
crying,
Now
yes.
already operational creditors, to the extent we've heard, have been taken to be a ignored lot, or ignored a stakeholder set. And if you've seen kind of orders what have come, right, both at adjudicating level and the appellate, they have clearly shown a soft corner for the operational creditors who actually are at a slight disadvantage, right? So I'm not kind of linking it to threshold.
Right.
Threshold for sure is low, because for one of the 12 big cases, saying 1 lakh remains the threshold, it really does not add up. You're right. What exactly we're trying to say. But operational creditors, they are at the mercy in a way. That's the way the law has been designed.
Okay.
They may or may not have, they of course don't have a representation in the CUC. That's the first negative they have. For a threshold of 1 lakh, right, if they were to appoint an insolvency professional, the fee and the charges are going to be much higher. So, right, so day one,
So it's not
for
serving
a
the
smaller
purpose,
amount,
okay.
I have to kind of shell out more. Eventually it can get ratified, I can get a reimbursement, but whenever. In case of a waterfall in liquidation, if at all that happens, they are way down. So the chances of recovery or getting anything out of that. So from all the three perspectives, they are in any case ignored, a lot.
Right.
So whether it's by design or it's something apparently got missed, is being now tried and being corrected by the NCLT.
Okay.
Right, by trying to saying that you cannot differentiate between the creditors, or there should not be discrimination between the certain class of creditors, and the orders are pretty clear on that. So my suggestion would be rather that better to have tweaks in the law, let have people clarity when they initiate the process, rather than live with uncertainty, look at appeals, look at further litigation, delaying the process, including the cost and everything, and finally you may or may not get anything. So why be at the mercy at the last of the the process? We should be more clear within the law itself. So an
you
amendment
touch
of-
various aspects here.
To respond to that, I understand these gentlemen's concern because they obviously face it day in day out. I have the immunity of a professional. But there's one aspect which I feel which can be a solution to this. Instead of criticizing the law, why don't we change our practices to suit the law also? Now, for example, our fear that an operational creditor, because obviously big companies have innumerable number of vendors.
Right.
And innumerable number of vendors, all of them cannot be settled at once. That money of that nature is not available.
Right.
So why don't, I can suggest that companies can actually change their practices, paper practices. If I want to give a credit period and I need a credit period of 3 months, extendable to 2 months more, let's write it on paper. Today people can accept it more. the practicality of might be, it may take time, but at least the bigger companies obviously have a strong arm over the vendors. At least tell them there is an insolvency law in place. We cannot clear your invoice within 2 months or at an interest rate of 24%. Because if I write it on paper, tomorrow they will go to the NCLT.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So let me write something which I can fulfill. Let us all say things that we can do. That's one practice which we can change. And then in that case, and maybe yes, I do agree that the 1 lakh limit may be a little less. Although in 1 lakh cases, I'm sure Mr. Ahuja will give a discount. But otherwise, he may probably do it for 25,000. Otherwise, he may charge 50 lakhs.
I would need a response to that because it cannot go untouched. So the point is, and it is very important to kind of for people to
maybe 10 lakhs. I think.
No, it's not about that number. What happens is this is right from the perspective of the applicant. Now, applicant is like coming with a threshold of 1 lakh. Anything above 1 lakh, he's eligible to kind of file. What happens? And there are a lot of people who have kind of committing this mistake. What they're saying is like your default is only 5 lakhs. I'm happy to charge you X amount, but if somebody else's like default is 10 crores, then I charge higher. What they're missing out is at the day end they have to sit and take care of the corporate data, not your default.
Correct.
Everyone comes at the same platform. So banks probably will file the claims which probably will like run to thousands of crores. Where I sit as the resolution professional is managing the corporate data of 50,000 crores. So whether it started by a 1 lakh default or a 10,000 crore default, it really does not matter because what I have to do, I have to figure out what kind of professionals, infrastructure, team, effort is required to manage the corporate data. That's where people are not able to link. And hence the problem. So discounts are ruled out.
Yes, but he also touched a very important point, the behavioral change. Certain practices, so far being followed by the corporate. Maybe, Mr. Saurabh would like to
see if you look at, I think that is a valid point that you change your contracts and all those things. Everybody has contract. I think if you look at contract, there is no place for interest, at least in most of the big organizations. Okay, but you will find those kind of things invariably on the invoices and all. So that is one piece to take care about. Even if you look from the business side, no operational creditor will be after you until and unless he is pretty sure that your amount is not paid. Okay, and he is not happy with you. Okay. It doesn't happen in normal case, even if you have contract of 30 days or 60 days, even if you are paying beyond 180 days, because they understand which business will pay in how many days.
Right.
And they need to continue with their business also. If they initiate litigation for one corporate, the other will definitely take him in blacklist.
It will impact their business. Correct.
So operational creditors is not so much of worry as far as business is concerned, because if you are good in doing businesses, they are anyway, if they are earning profit, they will continue with business with you.
Right.
Even if you make payment in 30 days or 180 days, they will discount for the interest.
No murmur. No, they will not voice any concern.
One aspect, please.
So that is one kind of thing. But despite those things, this limit of 1 lakh is something disturbing, because if company is seriously in some problem, then each and everyone will come after that, despite knowing, as Sanjeev rightly said.
It's also an irritant, by keeping that kind of a low threshold, you are kind of giving an option to so many of your vendors, right, to come and irritate you if they were to. So it's not always that, they know for sure that you will pay or not pay, but it's a tool in their hand which probably was not required. So at the level of companies what we are operating, let's take the case of big well cases. All I'm saying is the same threshold applies there. Why? So maybe it can get linked to at least some net worth or maybe a turnover or something. But if say example, SR does not commit a default of 10 crores or more, then there is something serious.
But Sanjeev, the ground reality which you touched is that most of the operational creditors will not voice any kind of concern and will not irritate you, will not charge you that, you must make my payment. And with so much of competition now, if you look at the hit the competition is generating, the credit period itself has got extended, even if whether it is on paper or no paper. If I have to do business with him, naturally I will prefer that even, the contract says within 90 days the payment will be made, I will prefer waiting for 180 days. In fact, even in GST, for instance, this clause has not worked, And 180 days thing, it was almost going to be amended.
Many reversal on account of credit.
But it will be. Finally it will be done. Right. So, but 1 lakh threshold again, whether the threshold is 1 lakh or 10 lakh, if operational creditors have this kind of mindset, probably they will not disturb them.
The problem will come to the extent of rogue vendors. Now,
Yes.
obviously, the consistent
yes.
and continuous bona fide vendors, obviously, they will not go against any big corporation out of trust.
Even for a
Correct.
bigger amount for that.
Correct.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
rogue vendors, what they'll do is, if
Yes.
assuming I supply goods of, below par quality, and the company is not paid, the company is not raised an issue yet, they would raise an issue when the time comes.
Right.
So now the law currently says in Mobilox and Innoventive Supreme Court says if I have to raise a dispute, I have to raise it
There and
now,
then, there and
immediately,
then,
then
yes.
and there. Before even I have a discussion, I'll have to start an arbitration or give a legal notice.
Right. Right.
Generally, people don't do that because the people are busy doing business rather than litigating.
Correct.
That person takes advantage of that, and one person can currently create a news in the newspaper tomorrow, insolvency against a big
Yes.
corporation,
Huge
ABC
damage.
corporation,
Yes.
and which has a direct effect on the stock market.
Absolutely.
See, there is another thing that even if you look at the operational creditors, so let's say if I am going to acquire an asset, there will be some key suppliers, and if I want to continue with that business, I need help of them. So
Right.
they are also pretty sure that either it is with the promoter A or the acquirer, I am there.
Right. Correct.
So if-
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
they will not come up, they will
Yes.
not open up.
Right.
They will only come up if someone has filed something, then they will see whether I can get something out of it. Because now everything
Absolutely.
is. And in many of the cases I have seen that not, they said that there is a litigation cost I will serve. Then they will say that Mr. Financial Creditor, you need to take this much of haircut and all. But they also ensure that yes, something will go to the operational creditors.
True.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because you need to run business with them. You cannot just take that business
probably
and
that
run
was
it
the
yourself.
reason that, and again, I think probably the mindset of the government at that time was the public sector banks were bad, in bad shape.
Right.
Their capital was eroded, and their NPAs was mounting. So probably that is why this operational creditors were
See,
not given representation in the COC also.
I'll
The focus was not on them. They said in any case it's a corporate.
see the one practical example. There was one RP who told me that they were assigned the job to run the company in between until they said resolved. So many went into the business, and as we were discussing that RP is not so professional to run the business. We be very clear. So he need certain funds for, let's say, employees, some repair maintenance, and some key inputs. Now until or unless he paid for that key inputs, factory can't be run. So he reached out to employees, he reached out to all those stakeholders, told them that you defer your payment by such amount, you defer like this, and then only that business could be run. Otherwise, see that in 180 days or 270 days, if RP is not a business minded person, but he will do.
Right.
Either he will innovate something or he will sitting idle.
So whenever it's about resolution professional, I need to step in.
Yes.
Because that's the community I represent here.
Okay.
So point is, when this law was being devised, right, and the draft was, whether we talk about the BLRC report and all, so they wanted to have a professional who works as an officer of the court with the powers given by the court and
Right.
law and run the process, not exactly the way the promoter was running. Right? Because there's a whole shift of creditors and control. So he becomes a nominee representative of the lenders or the creditors, or rather a collective body called COC. Because there's nothing called COC apart from this law.
Right.
It's a, it's risen because of, this concept has been there in the law. And there are clear regulations and, sections which allow a resolution professional to hire other professionals to run the organization.
Right.
Intent is to make it to the best of the ability to make it as a going concern. Now we don't expect the resolution professional to be a champion or expert in all the fields. He can never be, right? Because the thresholds in terms of the qualification or the experience, they were professionals. So it's a profession of professionals,
Right.
but they need to be managers, good managers, and to an extent leaders.
Right.
But they are not expected to fill the shoes of the promoter or the entrepreneur. Only for 180 days, they have to keep it afloat. That was the intent.
Right.
So that they can run the process, make it transparent, put the facts to the COC, invite the resolution applicants, put up a plan, okay? And mind you, the latest, this order of Supreme Court in SR was very clear that, they don't take calls even on the plans. If they find the plans are complied with the law, all they do is they put it to the COC for their call, for their approval. So these are the people, right, who are the officers of the court who are supposed to keep it afloat for 180, 270 days if everything else is normal. Now, when there's a litigation, when there are people, when there's a hostile environment by the promoters or by other stakeholders, for sure it will be a challenge. And the fingers are normally pointed on the resolution professional because he's the person in charge. So from that perspective, I understand, but let's see the challenges what he has. He was not expected to kind of, take company from one level to another. He's not expected to do that. He's just a manager, officer of the court. So from that perspective, let's be a bit less harsh on the profession.
Accepted. But now the one interesting point which he touched, the COC,
Yes.
Particularly, if we look at, in a couple of cases I observed that, there is one bid which has been accepted.
Right.
The details are public.
Right.
Then the second bidder comes up with a better,
Absolutely.
better bid.
Yeah.
I mean, then how it's going to be never-ending process. That is how it's going to be. So how do you look at this? What should be done about it?
Well, we all choose wives.
Okay.
No, I'm saying that at some point we have to be loyal to something.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
So that
So
is
that
how,
is
but,
some.
but the law doesn't have anything. I mean.
Okay,
that is
so
something.
again, when this was being drafted, the intent was great. But, frankly, let's accept we are masters in gaming the system wherever we have an opportunity. Now it's in public domain. We can actually take the case of Binani Cement, right? Dalmia's had it through and through. They went to the finishing line.
Right.
It was all accepted. And here comes a parachuting from Ultratech and they say we are going to give you X plus. In the current case of SR, we are seeing ArcelorMittal having accepted. Now, whatever good, bad reason, now SR comes back and says, I'll give you more and more with all interest, no haircuts.
Right.
Now, point is, what we need to understand, and it needs to be decided at the top level.
Yes.
There is a concept called maximization of, the value.
Value of this,
Right?
yes.
Great. Then there is a timeline.
Right.
Now, you need to put these two things together. What we do normally, we become myopic. Either we look at timelines, so we say I don't care about anything else, and then comes the principle of natural justice and fair and equity and all that stuff, or we say maximization of, the value of the assets. But when we focus on maximization, we lose the track of timelines. Now, in a 3-hour session, if you are prepared well for an exam, you need to put in your effort, but within those 3 hours.
Correct.
If you want extension, then there's no
Yes.
end to it.
Right.
So that is where I'm saying we need to strike the
So
right
that needs
balance.
to be locked. There has to be a
Maybe-
period
And a
where-
right balance.
Maybe I
between
think
the
we can
timelines
go
and
for a more reasonable timeline. Maybe 180 days is not enough.
Exactly. So that
Maybe
was
maybe
the
a year's time would be reasonable.
Correct.
Or maybe size of corporation wise, you can actually have a very
Various
timelines also
timelines.
segment.
Yes, absolutely.
There's another aspect which I've always believed that the promoter's mind should never be underestimated. I mean, not on the size of the business. You take any small organization which is doing a business of 10 lakhs or the biggest of corporations doing a business of 5 lakh crores, it doesn't matter. The promoter has a mind and a heart of the business. He may have failed.
Correct.
But I personally believe that a promoter should be given some space, at least the initial top management should be given some space to put their views in the COC along with the IRP. Because see, ultimately we all point fingers.
Right.
Judiciary will say that IRP did not do job properly. IRP says judiciary did not give me right directions.
Correct.
But the truth is, neither is the IRP the all in all of a company,
Right.
nor is judiciary is anyway not supposed to be a
Correct.
management. It is only an emergency management.
Correct.
Totally.
So management should be done by people who can manage. People who are the visionaries of the
Who
business.
was
So
supposed
keeping
to.
them away.
Who was
Yes.
supposed
They
to.
made a mistake.
Sure.
If there is a case of fraud, okay, there must be some exception. They should not be part.
Correct.
But people who ran their business may not be
It's
that
a case
successful.
of genuine business failure. Yes.
Yes, they should be given their
Correct.
say should be given an importance in
Yes.
the meeting.
So it's touching a very important point, and I think your main target is section 29A.
Right.
Frankly,
That is
right?
a hot topic.
That's a hot topic, but that's what has changed the entire course of the law.
Right.
Till 22nd November, everything was still going because we were all reading law, and we're saying, okay, this is the way it will move forward with whatever hiccups and challenges we'll have. Come 23rd November, and we have the amendment ordinance, and it has changed this entire thing, and we have seen amendments thrice in 29A.
Right.
The latest being that it won't be applicable in the entirety on MSME. So I totally concur with you on the part that the person who initiated the business, he has the heart and soul and mind and the brain and whatever he is about that business.
Right.
So if I try to link everything, maximization, transparency, timelines and the promoter bit,
Right.
I'm saying why not? And this coming from the grounds up, from experience. I'm saying why not do a public auction? Why debar people? Because the reasons are at times known, at times unknown. There have been external factors, right? I mean, the whole mining issue became because, the Supreme Court went ahead and, banned the mining and all that. It had a trickling effect.
Yes.
So the power sector went buzz, the steel sector went buzz, the mining sector went buzz, the employees, and what about the MSMEs? So 3-4 times a MSME is supposed to have a haircut because of his customers going under, the knife. Right. Imagine that's the next target or the victim himself.
True.
So to me, timelines for sure. I mean, I've been pretty vocal that 1 year is a good timeline for anyone. It's very logical. You've been suffering for 5 years, 10 years with the NPA. Right. 1 year is a business cycle for even an IRP or for the COC to understand what's happening. And second point is make it more transparent, consistent. Put a public auction. If you're talking about maximization, if the promoter comes back and says, I'm happy to give you the money, whichever way I like, I'm able to kind of put our resources together. That's good enough pressure on him. He's coming to senses.
Right.
And if that be the case, he's probably the best doctor to treat the patient. So why not? So I mean, I also think we need to put it all together. So 29 is being separately discussed. Timelines are being separately discussed. Everything has a connect at the back end.
Okay.
That's my
so before we wind up, let me touch this taxation side. Mr. Saurabh would like to touch that aspect, the IBC and taxation. Siamese twins, yes?
You can say so, though there are certain changes in the company's law, there are certain changes in the income tax law, but still the moment you put a resolution plan through a deal, okay, maybe it is slump sale, maybe you are acquiring the entire company, though you are interested in part of it.
Right, okay.
Maybe you are coming up with the consortium, maybe you want a let's say transfer of assets, conversion of debt into equity. So all those kind of things, the list is endless, at least 10-15 items are there. So you need to look at those kind of things, that how it will impact.
Right.
Okay. And there is another aspect, that the moment, one aspect which is I think mostly talked about, that the moment a lender is taking a haircut, okay, so how you will route those entries so that MAT implications are not there, because immediately your book profit and all those things will shoot up.
Right.
Okay. So yes, from taxation angles, a lot of things need to be looked into. Whatever deal you are going through, how it will suit to your current kind of a structure, and whether you will be able to maximize the benefit. So everybody tries it, that because each and everything is attached to valuation.
Right.
If I am getting some benefits, I will definitely put a value to it.
Okay.
But one sector which, although initially I said that there should be a behavioral change and the companies are responding, but one sector which definitely did implode is the real estate. We have regularly, initially the arguments were to say that those who have assured returns for advance paid, they can be financial creditors. Subsequently, an amendment said that every buyer can be a financial creditor.
Right.
Now that is fine, but what happens is the good old saying goes, when everybody is special, nobody is special. Now earlier under the consumer court, it would take them 1.5 years to win a case. But what happened was that by the time builder would cough up some money.
Right.
Now every consumer, even one consumer coming forth, there is a declaration of insolvency and the builder says, fine, you run the company yourself, I can't do anything. Land per se has no value unless we add value to the land.
Right.
So builder says, fine, take the land away from me. You take a line of creditors, if you can run the company, run it. So at the end, I've seen many situations where the builder is being called back, if not officially, unofficially, to say, now what do we do? Okay, we have won the war, but we've won the battle, but we've lost the war.
Yes.
Now, but help us through.
Right, correct.
So that is one aspect I think we should where I felt that promoters' interest, like Mr. Ahuja was explaining also, that promoters should also be
the promoter knows what went wrong.
and how it was built in the first place.
How it can be repaired.
So give him the
also,
benefit
yes.
of doubt at least once and
Right.
do it transparently.
Correct.
Earlier what used to happen, the typical OTS, I mean, it's restructuring, the entire SDR and CDRs, they didn't work. Okay, because it was also happening closed door. Now you have a mechanism which is transparent. There's an officer of the court sitting. Why can't we have the same dialogue? Right? But it's much more like transparent, consistent with certain norms. But here, just two quick points I want to kind of So there's enough, what should I say, a provision in law, both in the code as well as in the regulations, and somehow it's getting missed at a at a bigger level. A regulation 37 in the code, it says that anything for the maximization of the value, so a resolution plan actually can have any kind of a condition till the time the survival of the company is assured or the corporate data. So this was also to kind of address the point and linking to the tax part or like, haircuts on the statutory dues or something. We talk about the compliances, we talk about trying to pay everyone, but we lose that, the company may not be in a position to survive because there'll be no resolution applicant if I put all the load, because here the survival is at stake.
Right.
That is one. So regulation 37 apparently is kind of getting ignored. It gives you an option of slump sale, it gives an option of like, bifurcation, do this, do that, come out with anything, change constitutional documents to the extent required, which means you can actually tweak anything and everything. Only with a larger objective,
Right.
maximization and survival. Second point is, we are also struggling with the finality of section 31(1) order, which expectedly has to be binding on all the stakeholders. But the very fact that the adjudicating authority comes out with 31(1) and somebody goes to NCLAT and a new chapter starts. So they have, for example, Electro Steel today, but there is some case happening at appellate and like, those people are not wanting to budge. This needs to stop. If you're talking about finality, then we need to really kind of put the right meaning to finality.
This is one aspect where Mr. Ahuja would actually throw some light. So one thing that we notice in sections 40 odd and all in IBC is that if there is X quantum of assets that have been created and the liability balance out, but it sometimes so happens to the extent of liabilities that have been created, tangible assets are not visible, which creates a suspicion of fraud, that there is a fraud in siphoning.
Correct.
Now the power to cure fraud and siphoning is restricted. The books that the IRP, correct me if I'm wrong, the book that IRP can look into about transactions of last 2 years or 1 year or 2 years.
Okay.
Right.
Shouldn't there be some sort of more window available? Because fraud does not necessarily have to happen in 2 years and collapse. It could be a cancer that has grown over years.
Right.
So do you feel that it should be a little more power should be given to the IRP to look into that? Particularly because in Numetal's case now they say the lifting of corporate wheel, it can be the norm. It can happen if we have a suspicion of fraud.
Right.
Whether we, as an IRP, you feel that you need a little more of a window to give even effective result.
So it goes back to my previous suggestion that ideally 1 year time frame was in any case better. So you run through a business cycle. You start in April, you end in March, you start in January, you end in December, at least you get 12-month window. So a lot of things which probably otherwise would not have happened, looking at a seasonal business or something, now they'll come back. Point one. Second thing is, it's a 1 year thing if it's a normal situation, or a 2 year if it's about related party transaction. That's what the current law is. But prima facie, in case you feel as a IRP, as a professional, that there is a potential fraudulent or undervalued or preferential or extortionate transaction, then you need to kind of really pick up and go back. Right? So then you can't ignore, and you should not. But here the suggestion I'm making is, probably we also had a discussion with IBBA on this thing. It's an NPA situation, right? Assets are lesser than the liability on the other side. Why don't we make a forensic as a norm? Okay, because there's an NPA, there's a lack of trust. Trust deficit is like the beginning. That's the premise on how things are getting started. Why don't we say like as soon as possible, depending on whatever is timelines, we get a forensic started. So at least there's a separate team of people who are experts. They take the load off the IRP, who's supposed to ensure a going concern, and then there are people who are exclusively looking into this aspect.
So on this note, let me thank all the 4 guests, and they have made very wonderful suggestions. I'm sure the lawmakers, the policy makers would like to take note of some of them, and particularly the forensic side. It's a good suggestion that we must give confidence to the bidders, the companies which are going to take over those kind of assets and maximize the value of the assets. And similarly, the quality of data is very important, in the whole process. And as Mr. Ahuja rightly suggested, that the load on the professionals, it must go down. Otherwise, they will get bogged down and they will not be able to ensure that it's a going concern. It continues to be a going concern. So those challenges will remain. And as rightly suggested by Mr. Menon, that there should be some space for the promoters, those who have given their heart, they have given their soul to the business. For some reason, the business has failed, and businesses keep failing and keep growing. They come back. So it's nothing new. The business is all about failing, and then success is all about, which it comes occasionally. So in that scenario, we recommend, they rightly suggested that promoters should be given a stake, maybe limited role, either in the advisory capacity and whatever capacity that might be debated and discussed, and some role should be assigned so that the professionals could get the insight from the promoters and could run and ensure that the business continues to be a going concern, and at least the assets, the value of the assets are not destroyed and destructed. It remains there, and the creditors will also be much more happier if that happens, and they could get the maximum value out of it. So thanking you all for watching TIOL Tube.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.